Today's episode of Making an Addict is sponsored by Able Life Recovery, online recovery coaching services for anyone needing additional support on the path to obtaining and maintaining sobriety. Coaching plans are designed with you in mind. For our listeners, you can get 25% off your first coaching plan by visiting ableliferecovery.com, reviewing the available plans, and scheduling your first appointment. Use promo code LIFE, that's LIFE, and get 25% off today. Addiction is a chronic disease. Millions of people worldwide suffer from substance and behavioral addictions. An addict's life is often unmanageable, leaving the addict and his or her family and friends feeling completely powerless over the disease. Without treatment, addiction can result in disability or premature death. You are listening to Making an Addict. My name is D.J. Burr, and I'm an addict in long-term recovery. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, behavioral addiction specialist, and best-selling author of I Just Wanted Love, Recovery of a Codependent Sex and Love Addict, now available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. I intend to bring you different perspectives about addiction from various sources, including other addicts in recovery, clinicians who treat recovering addicts, and family and friends of addicts to discover what makes an addict. Listener discretion is advised. To learn more about this podcast, check us out at makinganaddict.com or follow me on social media at DJBurr1022 on Facebook, the DJ Burr on Instagram, and at DJBurr1022 on Twitter. Good morning and welcome to Making an Addict. Today I'm talking with Arlina, and she is a person in long-term recovery. Arlina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, DJ.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you and I were able to connect. Arlina is a podcaster herself, as well as a person in long-term recovery, like I said earlier. And I think she might have some interesting perspectives on what makes an addict. So, Arlina, tell us, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think what I'll do, if you don't mind, I'll just sort of give you a little background of who I am and where I come from, so maybe your listeners can kind of get an idea of, who's talking. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Well, so I am 48. I live in San Jose, California. I'm married. I've been married for 19 years. I have 2 children who have actually never seen me loaded. I'm really grateful for that. I have 2 boys, one who's 16 and one who's 13, and I'm a professional salesperson. And like you said, I'm also a podcaster. I have 2 podcasts, actually. One is a sales podcast, and one is a sales podcast focused on high-tech sales, and then one that's focused on recovery, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But about my past, so I grew up in a very peaceful house for the most part. Early on, my mother's from Mexico City, and my father was born and raised in Kentucky and moved out to the West Coast when he was a child. And my parents are both very nice people. They're hardworking, middle class, educated. My father's college educated. My mom was the first foreign exchange student to Klamath Falls, Oregon, and that's where she graduated high school. And that was kind of a cool story for her. She was 14 years old when she came to the U.S. and went to high school all 4 years. And listen, I can't imagine, me as a 14-year-old leaving my family for 4 years. That would have been pretty intense. But yeah, she's a very positive person these days. Not so much when I was growing up. I when I talk about my family of origin, I talk about how when I was coming up, that my 2 predominant feelings when I was growing up was guilty and wrong, and I think it was due to my relationship with my mother, who's, I always say she had 2 feelings. She was either really happy or she was really pissed. My parents divorced when I was 7, and that was really hard on me. And something else that had happened when I was growing up, I had been raised in the church and taught that, I should be a good little girl and be nice. And I had no awareness of how to maintain healthy boundaries. And a neighborhood child started sexually molesting me, starting from about age 4 or 5. It's almost my earliest memories. And it went on for years. And I felt really bad about who I was. And I was ashamed. I grew up in the church, but I was ashamed to stand before God. Like, I knew God was everywhere. I had this concept that God was everywhere and all loving, but there was, there's this idea of hell in religion. And I was afraid I was going to go there because I was bad. And didn't help that it was a girl that was doing it. So it was very confusing for me. And this went on for years. So, as I grew older, my self-esteem, who I thought I was bad, and I really wanted to be good. And I started acting out sexually at an early age and using drugs and alcohol at an early age. And I just couldn't seem to be good. And at some point I gave up. I thought, if I can't be good, then I'm going to be good at being bad. And, that I had to find ways to justify my behavior. And I used humor a lot to sort of justify what I was doing. For instance, when I drank, I had my first drink of alcohol when I was probably about 10. Like I said, my parents had divorced, and my mom had gone out on a date, and I have an older sister who's 2 years older than me. She was the good girl. And my mom had gone out on a date, and we were home alone, and I'm not really sure what drove me to this. I must have been about 8 or 10, but there was a bottle of alcohol in the cabinet, and I decided to drink some of it. And I remember the alcohol burning my lips, and it burned my throat. It burned all the way down until it hit bottom, right? And then when it hit bottom, this warmth spread through my whole body. And I didn't realize how bad I felt until I felt good, right? And in that, I had like this feeling of euphoria, and I was physically numb, like nothing could hurt my body. I recall we had these Spanish tiles in this hallway, and I recall falling on it thinking, wow, this doesn't even hurt. I was bouncing off walls. And listen, I was by myself, right? My sister wasn't drinking at all. So it was like, it was a little party for one I was having, and had a really good time, apparently. But that first night, I got sick from the alcohol. I threw up everywhere. And my sister, being the good codependent that she is, she cleaned me up, she put me to bed, and she didn't say a word to my mother. And that sort of began our codependent alcoholic relationship for many years, actually. I found out later that the reason why she didn't say anything to my mom is because she thought she was going to get in trouble for me. And that was significant for me because it wasn't until years later that I recognized that in our family dynamic, we didn't take appropriate responsibility for ourselves or others. Like, I was taking inappropriate responsibility for other people and not enough for myself. And that sort of was a reoccurring theme from that point on. But I didn't recognize it. I didn't understand what was going on. So years of dysfunction in relationships, at school. I remember drinking before school in junior high and being sent to the principal's office one time because I was acting out in class. And then later when I was growing up, when I was older and of legal drinking age, I was that girl. I just never knew who was going to come out. And I feel like I had like these two alter egos. It was either Badass Betsy or Wimpy Wendy, because I was either fighting or crying. And I just never knew who was going to come out once I started drinking. And I did drugs and, smoked a lot of pot and things like that. But I just never knew who was going to come out, right? And I would wake up sometimes and I would, I was a blackout drinker, but I would recall bits and pieces of the night before. And I'd be like, what was that all about? Like, I had no clue why I was exploding. I was so volatile when I was drinking. And I've come to understand through recovery that I wasn't really coping with my feelings. I wasn't processing my feelings. I was stuffing them. And for me, when I repress and stuff my feelings, when I drink, it all comes out, right? Like they say that alcohol is the truth elixir. And I don't necessarily believe that, because people say things they don't mean when they're drunk and angry, even angry. I mean, I know plenty of people who go into a rage and they say, sober, and they say things they don't mean, right? But all kinds of crazy stuff comes out of me when I put alcohol in my body. So, through a series of events, I grow up. When I'm 25 years old, I have my last drink of alcohol on my 25th birthday. I was in a relationship, and that relationship was really important to me. And if I backtrack just a little bit, somewhere along the line, I got the idea that love was going to save me. But I was thinking romantic love, right? Like I grew up playing with Barbies thinking that Ken was going to come rescue me. And that if I met my Ken, that everything would be okay. If Prince Charming rode up on his white horse and would save me, then life would be good after that. I would live happily ever after. And, it wasn't actually far off. It turns out it was love that saved me, but it didn't show up in a way that I recognized it. So what ended up happening for me is I was in this relationship with this man that I thought was my ideal, and I was losing him because of my drinking. In my sales career, I was, taking customers out at night, and I was getting really drunk, and I was, driving drunk. And I'm really grateful that I never got into an accident or a DUI or anything like that. But it was clearly something I was ashamed of and scared of. But I didn't seem to have any control over it, and didn't seem to have any control over whether I was going to drink or not, or what was going to happen once I started. And it was frightening, and I wanted better for myself. I grew up kind of poor, and I wanted things and stuff. I thought love and money was going to be my answer, in all honesty. And so I was ambitious, and I was trying to make some money in this sales career, and I was failing. And I kept taking these like Tony Robbins workshops, or Harvey McKay is a sales guy that was doing, had some good books out at the time. And this was in the early 90s. I got sober in 1994. So prior to that, I was seeking out all these self-help books, right? Like I kind of lived in the Barnes & Noble self-help section. I was reading all these books, and like I had my seeker, right? How am I going to fix myself? I was trying to think my way into right living. And later I learned that recovery is about living your way into right thinking. But like most of my ideas, it's almost the exact opposite, like 180 degrees away from what I would consider to be like the thinking of God, right? So all my best ideas were probably 180 degrees away from what the actual solution would be that would bring me peace and healing. But I was trying, right? I was willing to do anything. I was like, what is the secret? What information is going to come into my life that's going to help me make money and progress me in my career? But the first thing I have to do is take care of this drug and alcohol thing. And what helped me to recognize that I might have a problem is I got into a fight with my sister. I was out on a bar one night, and I was drinking, and she was driving my car on the way home, and she and I got into a fight. I really just lost my mind, and I don't remember most of this evening, but I was physically abusive to my sister. She was driving my truck, and I punched out the windshield and broke it in a couple places. The police were called. But because I had a friend that was a cop, I gave them his name and number, and they let me go. And that was something I had done actually several other times when I got pulled over for DUI like 4 times, and would give them his card, and they would let me go. But this particular night, it wasn't about the police. It was about my sister and I. And I really hurt her. And I felt so bad the next morning. I had that sickening, sinking feeling that something terribly wrong had happened. My hand was all black and blue and swollen, and I had to call my sister and find out what happened. I saw my car had been damaged, and I had to go see her to get the story because I didn't know what happened. But I knew something bad happened. And the look on her face that morning, it was that look of disgust and hurt and anger. And I felt so bad about who I was, and I couldn't deny any longer that my drinking was a really big problem. But I didn't understand, you know what it did, DJ, is that it made me start asking the questions. I was like, what is an alcoholic? When do you cross the line? Because I was certainly hanging out with lots of people who were drinking. So I was like, what is it that makes somebody an alcoholic? And it just led me one question after another, and I got deeper and deeper and deeper. And to be honest, it took me 2 years of asking these questions and really wrestling with my behavior and drinking and trying to do some control drinking and all that stuff to really find out what was going on with me. And I finally ended up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous through 2 of my customers. And these 2 guys were sober. I'll never forget them, Mitch and Randy. And Randy sort of explained some concepts like, if you don't take the first drink, you can't get drunk, or doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, and not being able to predict my behavior once I started drinking. All these things that we learn in 12-step groups was like, so it hit me so hard. It was so profound to me. These were the answers that I had been looking for in the aisles of Barnes and Noble and all these self-help books. I started, but it was carried in a message through a person. It was like somebody looking me eye to eye with eyes of compassion. Like I would tell them these horrible stories. It was like I didn't want to be doing what I was doing, and they understood. Like they got my kind of crazy, and they weren't judging me for it. They were like, yes, that happened, and there's a way out. And these 2 guys, Mitch took me to my very first AA meeting, and these 2 guys were so instrumental. They quickly turned me over to the women. They say, it's suggested that you work, the women work with the women and the men work with the men. So they turned me over, and I was petrified because I had spent my entire life seeking external validation from men mostly. Listen, I would have done anything to change the way I felt. My tagline is, if it was in a bottle, a bag, or blue jeans, I was doing it. I was willing to do anything to change the way I felt. And suddenly these 2 guys are telling me that I have to work with the women. And I was petrified because I had spent so much time and energy, decorating the outside, that I felt like I was an empty shell, and the women were going to see right through me. And I felt like I had nothing. I felt like I had nothing to offer. I had no female friendships, really. I burned everybody out. Even my own mother was like, I'm done with you. I can't deal with you. She had disowned me, and many times actually. So but you know what? I was so desperate for recovery and to get better, and desperate for help, that I was willing to do anything. And I'm so grateful for the women in the rooms who took me in. And I'll never forget, I kept hearing about this 4-step. I kept hearing that a lot of people relapse over the 4-step, and I was petrified of relapsing. So my name is kind of hard to remember, but this woman remembered my name the second time she met me. And it was as if the clouds had parted and the sun was shining on her. And it was like the angels were singing, and it was like, she's the one. So I had asked her, it was kind of funny because I had asked her if she would listen to my inventory. And she looked me in my eyes with such kindness, and she said, I would be honored to. And then she said, but we're going to start with step 1. So that's what we did. We started with step 1. Isn't that funny? So we started with step 1, and this woman, she would say, okay, you're going to meet me here at this time and whatever, we're going to work the steps. And so she would show up, And I was like, oh my God, she's here. I was always surprised that she showed up when she said she would. And I did about a step a week for a while until I got to the fourth step. That took me a little while just because it's a painful process to look within and dig up all the resentments. But I was so grateful for this process because it was the first time I had an actual specific guideline of what to do, how to address my feelings and process them for the first time. So I went through all my resentments. I got very specific about the cause of the resentment and then how it affected me. And that was the first time that I saw that my self-esteem was taking hit after hit after hit after hit. And there was nothing left of me, right? And how do you cope with that? And I look back and I think, you know what? Drugs and alcohol kept me alive. They kept me alive long enough until I could get to the rooms. And I had one of those moments where I was like, oh, dear God, please help me. And, and this woman was so sweet to me. She guided me through that inventory. And not only did I see how my self-esteem was affected, I saw what my part was for the very first time. I was so defensive because I felt so bad about who I was. I was so defensive I couldn't see my part. But with her support and through her loving kindness, she was the one who helped me to sort out that I was not taking enough responsibility for myself. And I was taking inappropriate responsibility for others, meaning I was trying to control other people and manipulate other people so that I could get what I needed. And it came out in really ugly ways, right? Manipulation's it's a defect, really. And so she showed me compassion and kindness. And before I met this woman, I had this habit of, I needed to talk about what was going on in my life. I was very, they call it a drama queen, but I had some big feelings and I did not know what to do with them. And I would tell my business to anybody who would stand still long enough. And, but through this woman's kind, loving eyes and her presence, she made a safe space for me. And I would tell her what was going on in my life. I stopped feeling the need to share everything with everyone. I told one person everything and I was free. And then I got to work on my character defects and learn different ways of handling things. Like maybe I shouldn't say the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe I shouldn't respond in anger the moment I get an email or hear a voicemail or when somebody says something shitty to me or something that hurts my feelings. And you know what I mean? It's like, maybe I should wait. Maybe I should talk to somebody else first and see, did I do something to cause them to treat me this way? What is my part? And, from the time I got sober till now, it's been 22 years. My prayers have changed to when I have an interaction with somebody, I think, God, fix me, change me. What did I do? I want to be different. I want to be better. I've always wanted to be better. I think we all just kind of do the best we can with the information that we have. And I just wanted to be better. So my prayers these days revolve around, relieve me of the bondage of self, because it's my self-centeredness and my self-seeking that really get me all twisted up. I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I'm demanding. And I'm afraid I'm going to lose something that I have. Those are what my fears still revolve around today. And although I do have a very peaceful and beautiful life these days, stuff still comes up. I work really hard. I have 2 kids. I try to be a good mom. I try to be a good wife. And every once in a while, something just comes up that's beyond my control. Like my sweet 16-year-old son got his heart broken, and I wanted to stab a bitch, to be honest. But I don't know if it's the Latina coming out. I don't know, but I was mad. I was like, oh, no, she didn't. But yeah, she did. She broke his heart. And then what I get to do is be loving and supportive for my son. And then I get to go to my sponsor and be like, this is not, and she will say things, offensive things, like, this is none of your business. That's like, wow, that's so rude. But, because I'm the mom, right? I want to help my boy out, but he has his path. And and I'm here to help, and maybe I cross a boundary every once in a while. Boundaries are a funny thing, right? Like, we don't know where they are until we cross them, and we need to be open with ourselves and others to, constantly reassess. We're all just humans doing the best we can. So I feel like every day is better. Today I have a podcast called the ODAAT Chat podcast, which I've launched this week, and it's stories about recovery from addiction, all kinds of addiction, not just drugs and alcohol, but gambling, sex, food, whatever. Because in my mind, it doesn't matter what the problem is, the solution is the same. It always comes back to a spiritual solution, meaning a power greater than ourselves, whether it's the group of drunks or somebody, like another person that you admire or whatever. Personally for me, I'm cool with God. Me and God are cool. I always have been. And I got to redefine what God means to me. And for me, that works. And, that's how it is, and today what I do for my sobriety is, like, I went to a 6 a.m. meeting this morning. This week I chaired at a women's recovery center, and it's very young women with children who are living in this sober living environment. And a girl asked me to be her sponsor, and I just feel so honored that, I walked in feeling like, oh my gosh, these women are not going to relate to me. But it's interesting, the language of the heart crosses all boundaries, right? When we share from the heart, we understand each other. Maybe the circumstances are different, but the feelings are all the same. And so I left feeling connected and useful, and that maybe that my experience would benefit somebody else. And really, that's my goal today, is just to, do the best I can as in who I am. But my calling and my life's purpose is to help other people recover from whatever it is that they got going on. I feel like everyone's got a little something, right?
Absolutely. Wow, your story is so impactful. I can relate to almost everything.
Yeah, I know you and I have a lot of similarities. Yeah. I know that you have some childhood traumas, and
sure.
And your podcast is about and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it's about original harms, or where addiction comes from, right?
Right. And what I have found is that most people have unresolved trauma that leads them into the addiction, because we don't want to hurt.
Right.
We don't want to be in pain. And so I love what you said about how, the drugs and alcohol kept you alive until you could get into the rooms.
Yeah, that still chokes me up today, and because I was so desperate not to be in pain.
Yeah.
And I was so judgmental and hard on myself because I was acting out. I just didn't know what else to do. Right.
Right.
And,
there was no manual, and in terms of what to do.
Right. And aren't you, I don't know, I bet you've had the same experience where you meet somebody who's well-adjusted and you're just like, how did that happen? How are you so well-adjusted in life?
I've actually had people say that to me. It was interesting because when I was growing up, people would say, well, how did you not become an alcoholic? And at the time, I had not been drinking. And I said, oh, well, I just saw my environment and I didn't want to be a part of it. But I was still holding on to the pain.
Right.
I was still holding on.
And how did you act out in unhealthy ways then?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every relationship that I could even think of was unhealthy. And then, I would pick the wrong people. My picker was non-existent. And
beyond broken.
And I would pick the same person over and over again.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing how we do that? Mm-hmm. It's like the same person, just with a different face.
Yep, absolutely. And I kept picking really, really dysfunctional people who looked exactly like my parents. You know,
Really?
their behaviors were very similar. And then I got
Right.
to play one role, and they got to play the other role, and we were just reenacting my childhood. And I once told
Yeah,
my
it's
mother
amazing.
that. I said, you know,
Oh,
every relationship I've had looks just like your marriage.
how did she respond to that?
And she said, I'm sorry.
Oh,
You know?
did that bring you peace to hear her say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think she got it.
Oh,
Because that was the
yeah.
example. That was the
Of
example
course.
of her taking care of an alcoholic, right?
Mm.
And as a result
Mm-hmm.
of him being absent, using me to, you know, take care of her and my siblings, right? Putting a lot of
Mm-hmm.
responsibility on me, and then me
Inappropriate
suppressing,
responsibility.
inappropriate responsibility, and me suppressing everything that there was about myself, even the fact that I was gay. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even access that and really, you know, process
Oh,
that or ask for help. And so I just suppressed it, and then would act out in various ways. And then that just left me vulnerable to be
yeah.
attacked by a predator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this person came into my life and said, "Oh, I'll take care of you." And I was like, "Oh, finally." Yeah,
Right. Someone's
that
going to
was a
rescue me and save
right.
me.
Absolutely. And so, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I do the work that I do now, is because there are a lot of people who have gone down that path, and I want to make sure that they have
Mm-hmm.
a place where they can talk, where they can share, where they can ask for help. And that's why it's so important
Yeah.
for me to do these podcasts and get people's stories out there so we can heal.
Right. Yeah. Listen, I don't mean to sound like a beauty pageant and stuff, but we are healing the world.
We are.
We're after world peace,
Yes,
right?
one day at a time.
One person at a time.
And
And I
one
love
person at
the
a
work that
time.
you're doing.
Thank you.
I see that you've dedicated your entire life to helping other people and talking so openly about things that, the mainstream is not always receptive to, but there are people who need to talk about it. And, where this idea that we should be ashamed about the things that happen to us. Um, there's sometimes it surprises me that people can, like, I hear these stories. I do a lot of 12-step meetings, and I hear these horrible stories, and I'm sometimes surprised that people survive their childhoods. And listen, a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't survive their
Yeah.
childhood. But those who do, I feel compelled to reach out and let people know that there's a different way. We don't have to suffer. And, drugs and alcohol were my coping skill. It was really drugs and alcohol in men, to be
Mm-hmm.
perfectly honest. That was my coping skill because that took me out of me. And there's a million ways that we can distract from our feelings. And I do everything in excess except for recovery for some reason, because it's so painful to look at.
Yes, it
Like,
is
the whole
painful.
point, it's painful. And listen, that is the root of the addiction. And I say in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous that alcohol is but a symptom. It's just a
Mm.
symptom of a deeper problem. And so the work that you do with other people to help them get to the inner work, I've done lots of 12-step stuff, but I've also done a lot of therapy. And what therapy did for me is I was able to go back to my childhood, those experiences I had being sexually awakened so early, and then being promiscuous later on. And now I recognize that when a girl is promiscuous, I bet you 9 times out of 10 that it's because she was sexually abused in
Yeah.
some way.
She's working out the
And
earlier issue.
yeah, because we need to gain power over our sexuality. And so, like for me, I couldn't be good. So I was like, I'm going to be good at being bad,
Yeah.
and so I was.
I had that
Trust me.
mentality too.
Right. So did men go through that too, you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's be curious about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
But
just
men
like,
don't get the shame though around, like, if a woman is promiscuous, she's a whore, and if a man is promiscuous, he's a stud. You know what I mean?
that wasn't my experience. I thought I was a whore.
And you felt bad about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt bad about it every single time.
Oh, because it makes you feel like so you didn't do it for love. You do it because you were distracting, or did you feel like you were selling yourself out? Or
I thought I was looking for love. I thought that was love. I thought sex was love.
Right. Me too.
I just didn't know. I had no clue. I didn't know what love was at all. So I just kept, accepting whatever was handed to me.
Right.
I didn't have that. I didn't have a good template. I had no model of what love looked like.
No model.
And so for me, it's just like getting a lot of clarity and education about what healthy relationships look like, and what healthy boundaries look like, and coping strategies. I mean, I've learned so much, and I continue to learn every day. And that's the thing. We have to continue to do the work. Yeah,
because we have different opportunities for growth, right? Like, it seems like I've heard this, and maybe you've heard this too, but a lesson is repeated until it's learned. Like, there's no mistakes, there's only a lesson. And the lesson is repeated until it's learned. And like for me, I have a lesson around my sister. She and I really, that was like in the 22 years I've been sober, that's the one relationship that I've never been able to fully find peace around. And, I'm still unpacking that stuff today for me, it shows up in the form of an unhealthy sponsee. I will occasionally get this sponsee. It's like love relationships. It's like the same person, it's just a different face, right? And so I keep getting this same person in my life, and I'm like, what is the lesson? What is the lesson? And for me, I don't do well around people who are victim-y.
Yeah.
And because they're very powerful, and they just they mess with me so hard. I lose my peace around it. I try to control, and for me, like when my sister was a teenager, she was very depressed and suicidal. She never attempted suicide, but that was the fear. It felt like an imminent occurrence was about to happen, and my mother told me that we had to save her.
Oh my.
And so I got this message that I had to save my sister, and I couldn't control her. I couldn't make her be different. Still can't. She's 50 years old, and she lives with my mom, never been married, no kids. And she just seems to be in this limbo, like this is going to be her life.
I wonder if she got the same message that she had to save you, like she covered up for your drinking early on.
Absolutely. But she took she was the receiver of my abuse.
Yeah.
I was abusive towards my sister, mostly verbally, but it was that one night I was actually physically abusive, and I punched her in the face and gave her a bloody nose, and that was like the worst that ever happened. But I was so ashamed about that, because I was the one who was supposed to save her.
Right.
And now, even though my sister's not really in my life that much, but I get these sponsees who I feel like I have to save, and it makes me crazy. Because I get like emotionally involved. I get like all enmeshed in their stuff, and it's not mine. And it's so hard for me to set boundaries for myself. Like, what is appropriate? Where is my responsibility? Because, alcohol and drug addiction, it's a life and death issue sometimes. For some people, it's and I had this one sponsee who kept going out, and the last time she went out, she took a bunch of pills, and she was suicidal. She was a sales girl too, and so she nearly talked her best friend and her husband, nearly talked them into letting her go to sleep. And had she been successful, she would have died. And it just freaks me out. And so I feel like I have to, it's my responsibility to transmit something that she's not ready or willing to receive.
So what do you do? So what do you do when you have these sponsees that you continuously get these sponsees who you think you have to fix? Where do you turn to for support?
Well, I have a sponsor.
Excellent.
And my sponsor is magical. And I always tell people, if you don't feel like your sponsor is the best sponsor on the planet, you should find a new one. Because there's so many, to say there's a wrench for every nut. There really is. I mean, when I get together with my sponsor, you know, she creates a safe place for me, and I'm able to work my stuff, go through my stuff quickly in her presence, right? And she's so gentle and kind and loving towards me, and she tells me that her responsibility to me is to be honest about what comes up for her. That's it. Like, she's very God-centered and God-led. You know, she talks about spirit a lot, and she's very like kind of like I'm sort of I like fashion and you know, I like shiny things, and she's very like Mother Earth, granola. I mean, she shaves her legs and everything, but barely, but barely. But she is my conduit for magic because she is such a clear channel. She doesn't have her stuff in the way. So I use her as my example, right? I'm not trying to save these women anymore. And listen, I'm still trying to figure this out because this is a recent, even though I've been sober a while, this is one of the things that has been very difficult for me to unpack and get to the heart of. Like, I don't get to choose when I'm gonna deal with this stuff. Like, maybe, like, you know, I'm sure like somebody like you that is, you know, that does therapy, you create a safe space for someone and help them get to their stuff. But this one for me comes up when I have like, God will send me these women so that I can deal with my issues. And so when I do, like, to answer your question, I go to my sponsor and I say, look, this is what's happening. And she'll offer me guidance. She's like, well, what's coming up for me is that you don't have peace around this, and this is not working for you. And if this isn't working for you, this is not working for her. So you need to set her free. You know, set her free of your control, set her free in your mind, turn her over to God. And it's very hard because it brings up all my control issues. It brings up all my fear. Like, so she keeps using this term, that I have to love my unlovable parts. And when I see how controlling I am, it looks ugly to me, DJ. I hate it. I hate that I feel the need to be so controlling. And I get mad. Like, I got mad at her, my sponsee, a couple times, and she came to me in tears. She's like, I feel so bad. I feel like you're mad at me. And she's like a little girl crying in front of me. And I kind of felt like she was manipulating me. But on the other hand, it was like, you know what? That was wildly inappropriate for me to be angry with you. Wildly inappropriate. And still taking inappropriate responsibility for other people. Right. And I react to them the way my mother reacted to my sister. My mother would get pissed at her.
You know what I tell people? I tell people about, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I tell people about control is that we're just trying to find safety. And we have to stop looking for other people to make us safe.
So let me ask you this. Here's a little free therapy you're going to give me. So when, you're right. You're absolutely right. Control is about making them act right so I can feel safe. But I love these people, and it brings me such pain to see them hurting, and it feels like crisis, right? It's like, how do I offer, I don't know what help looks like. If someone's asking me for help, it's so confusing, because then I'm going to offer suggestions, and then they don't do them, and then I feel angry because they get hurt. And when they're hurt, I feel pain. You know what I mean? Because I love them.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, these people are showing up and exposing their most vulnerable parts of themselves to you. And so you do become invested. And, you know, I've had many of sponsees who have gone down similar paths, but I also have clients who do the same. And so what I have to tell them is my truth, and I say whatever I'm feeling. So if I have a client or a sponsee who's acting out and they're causing harm to themselves and it's just going down a bad path, I'll simply say to them, I'm concerned for your safety.
Okay.
I want the best for you, but you have to want the best for you. And just know that I care and there are resources available if you want them. And then I have to let them go.
And then you let go.
Right.
Oh, isn't that the hardest part?
Yeah, yeah. The session ends or the sponsee meeting ends, and then God takes over, and you know what? I've done my part.
Okay.
Yeah, do your part and turn the rest over. But let them know that you do care and that you are concerned. And I think that's what all of us really want to know, is that someone actually gives a damn.
Right. Yeah, it's true, and that someone understands. And yeah, I have difficulty with the letting go part. And you know what my sponsor told me was, you know, you're responsible for being honest with them, you know, and sharing in a kind, loving way, and let God do the rest.
Right.
And so sometimes it's just hard to just let go.
Well, then I would say do some good self-care after that. Yeah, take care of yourself. That's the time for self-care.
The shopping?
Yeah, well...
The shopping count? Retail therapy?
Well, it all depends if that's not an issue for you.
It's not. It's just boring. I do like shiny things, but it's okay.
I totally understand. You know, but that's one of those things that a lot of people don't even realize that they have a problem with, is that, you know, we go out and shop and buy things and
buy things you can't afford.
Right. So, you know, it's just we can become addicted to anything. And that's just the
you know
truth.
what though? I'm like, if I could just find a way to get addicted to work and exercise, my life would be fabulous.
Isn't that true?
It has not. I try as I might. It just does not.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not doing it right. I don't know.
You know, I've seen stories on people who were addicted to like exercise, and they were exercising like 10 hours a day, and I'm just like, whatever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't have the tolerance for that. But you know, I'm good with half an hour.
An hour in a week. Right?
Yes.
Like, listen, I'm busy.
Yes, we keep
let's
showing
get
up.
A little self-care.
We keep showing up in our lives trying to do the best thing that we can do and helping others along the way. We're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Right? And
I think my favorite form of healthy self-care is, and it sounds kind of weird, or I don't know how it sounds actually, but I like to paint my nails. And there's like this, I found like this whole subculture on Instagram where these girls do like all this nail art stuff. So I've, you know, I'm like a typical addict, right? I'm like, you know, totally into it. So my Instagram account for a while, it seems to have faded a little bit because I'm so busy with the podcasting stuff. But my Instagram account for a while was nothing but nails. I did my nails like 3 times a week.
Goodness, yeah.
I was like, wow. Yeah, I did it a lot. It was super fun. I was getting good at it, getting lots of validation, and that was super fun. But it's just like a meditative thing, you know. It's kind of just checking out, doing something a little creative, and it seems harmless, right? Like it's nothing that I can spend I don't spend a lot of money on it. It brings me a little bit of peace, and it's kind of like my little checkout coping skill. So
it's art,
you know, just yeah. And you know, that's a healthy coping skill. You know, and I'm definitely a writer. I do a lot of journaling. Journaling has been huge for me. And what else do I do? I have animals. I have 5 chickens. I live in the city, and everyone's like, "You have chickens?"
Oh my goodness.
They're super cute, but they're the fancy kind. They're bantams. They're called silkies, and I have some Polish ones. And the silkies almost look like a baby chick because their feathers they're like these fuzzy furball things. Everyone is like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's a chicken." They have little feathers on their feet. They're like shoes.
Yeah,
so cute.
wow. That's a thing here in Seattle too. A lot of people have chickens.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, backyard. Having like backyard chickens are like a thing now, and so I have like these little hobbies that feel like healthy outlets that help me cope with my stress.
Right.
You know, with the journaling, a little bit of art, nurturing animals. I do a lot of service, sponsorship, and that all helps me, you know, progress in my recovery. Helps me stay sober and helps me stay centered. I do a lot of I found this app called HeadSpace. It's a guided meditation app. I did that for about a year, and then I found Sam Harris, who's an atheist, but he practices meditation, and he has these meditations on YouTube. And then there's Tara Brock. She has guided meditation. She's very spiritual. So, it's like I have a whole set of tools that help me stay centered and peaceful and help me to flourish and have a healthy life. So,
excellent. Well, maybe some of our listeners will hear these tools that we're using and go grab them and use them.
I hope so. And it's amazing once we start. I'm sure this is your experience too. I mean, you've dedicated your life to helping others, but it's amazing how we all feel connected, and I feel like that is really the root of addiction, is feeling separate, right? Feeling isolation and feeling separated is, for me, the root of my addiction. And what helps me to heal from that is feeling connected. So whether it's talking to somebody like you, who's a very caring and loving soul, who understands, or talking to someone who's trying to get sober, giving it away, what was so freely given to me, it helps me feel connected. So I find ways to stay connected, and that seems to be doing the trick. I'll be if I'm coming up on a sobriety milestone, it'll be 23 years, April 23rd.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It feels like a big deal. I'm like, oh, God, I can't believe that's my number, but that's my number.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. I'm so glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Well, I want to encourage you to continue doing the amazing work that you're doing, because you are helping so many people. And, I tell people this is the best work I've ever done.
Yeah, it really is. You're doing amazing work, and I see how hard you work, and listen, you got some hustle. So I really respect that, and I'm proud of you. I think you're doing such great work. So, and I'm so honored that you would have me as a guest. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to share.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. Tell our listeners one more time where they can find your podcast.
So my podcast is on iTunes. It's called the ODAAT Chat podcast, and ODAAT stands for One Day at a Time, so it's ODAAT. And I have a Facebook page that's also called the ODAAT Chat podcast on Facebook, and
I'm looking it up right now.
Account. Are you? Yeah. So I just published the podcast is new, so I would love some feedback or suggestions on guests or topics. I have about 16 episodes recorded, so I just launched it. So I'm releasing one a day for, I haven't decided how long actually I'm going to be doing one a day for, but until I can kind of get some of these episodes out. All these people are chomping at the bit. When are you going to release my episode? I'm like, I don't know. I'm getting to it.
Right.
But I think the Facebook page is probably the easiest way to engage me if you want to talk about stuff, or listen, I'm happy to help and in any way I can. So I just appreciate the opportunity to share the podcast, and hopefully people get something out of it.
Great. Excellent. I'm sharing your Facebook page right now, and I'm going to start listening to your podcast, and I wish you nothing but luck.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Anything I can do to help you out, you just let me know. I feel like, we could be the dynamic duo and just heal the world.
One day at a time, one person at a time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. You have a great day. Thanks for having me.
All right. You take care.
Okay, you too.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Oh my God, what a fun episode with Arlina. I love her. She's amazing. Check out her podcast, ODAAT Chat, on iTunes and on Facebook. I will include links to her show and her Facebook page and all of the resources that she listed. I will make sure that you are able to connect with her and get more insight into the world of recovery and addiction from Arlina's eyes. I truly appreciate the message that she's putting out. Well, that's it for our show today, folks. Make sure you visit our sponsor today. That's ableliferecovery.com. They are providing online recovery coaching for men and women in recovery. So make sure you check them out and support them because they support us. Thank you for joining the discussion today on Making an Addict. In closing, I want you to understand that there are various opinions about addiction and what makes someone an addict. The opinions expressed here on today's show are those of the person who made them. I suggest you take what you heard, process it, and decide for yourselves what you believe in. If you have feedback or want to tell your story on the show, let me know by emailing makinganaddict@gmail.com, or you can reach me on social media. Again, I'm on Facebook and Twitter at DJBurr1022 and the DJ Burr on Instagram. Lastly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be of service. Recovery saved my life, and I will be forever grateful. I will keep giving back every opportunity I am given. Tune in next time to witness our ongoing discussion on Making an Addict. Making an Addict is produced by the Recovery Legacy Network, bringing you recovery on all fronts. Learn more at recoverylegacynetwork.com. Today's music features tracks by CDK and Spinning Markaba. Learn more about our tracks on makinganaddict.com.